Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Preemie Chats, and thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm Fabiana Bacchini, Executive Director of the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation, as known as CPBF. We are a charitable organization, and our mission is to empower families of premature babies through support and education. This Preemie Chat series is one of the many initiatives we have to bring information for NICU families and healthcare professionals. Here every Friday, we talk with experts, researchers, and parents who share with us their knowledge and experience. Also on our website, canadianpreemies.org, parents will find all kinds of resources and support. And today we're going to talk about NICU parents' mental health associated with family-centered care after discharge. NICU seeks to provide care to infants and their families that is family-centered, that is care that respects parents' role in infants' care, that is collaborative and provides parents the support needed to care for their infant. This talk will describe the result of an international study of 1,200 parents from 23 NICUs in 15 different countries. The purpose of this study was to examine if parents' perceptions of the NICU staff's ability to provide them with family-centered care during their hospital stay was related to their mental health at the time of their infant's discharge, and again, several months after they went home from the hospital. And I have here joining us live from Montreal, Dr. Nancy Feeley, who is a senior researcher at the Lady Davis Research Institute and the Center for Nursing Research of the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal. She's also a full professor at the Ingram School of Nursing at McGill University. For the past 25 years, her work has focused on advancing knowledge and practice in neonatology and neonatal nursing. Her research focuses on the psychological adjustment and parenting of mothers and fathers of newborns require neonatal intensive care. In 2020, she was appointed one of the inaugural fellows of the Canadian Academy of Nurses. She's honored to be a part of the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation. Dr. Feeley, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Fabiana.
And I also have her here joining us live from Finland, Dr. Anne Axling, who is an associate professor and the principal investigator in the research group of the Connected Health UTU research program, which aims to foster the use of information technology and digital solutions to support effective healthcare. Her academic career has included conducting quantitative and qualitative research in multidisciplinary research groups. In addition to her academic career, she has 10-year work experience as an ICU nurse. Her research interests include family-centered care and family well-being in neonatal research. I'm so honored to have both of you here, two passionate people about families. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we know we have a presentation, and to all of you watching us live here today, please do send your questions, your comments, your insights, and we're going to address them at the end of your presentation. The floor is yours.
So thank you. First of all, we feel very honored with Nancy to be able to share our research with you today. So Nancy and we are a part of the FCAN research group, which aims to keep parents and babies together in NICUs in all of the circumstances. This network was established 2010, and we have had yearly symposiums. And this is our first one from 2014. And this was actually the year that I met Nancy and we started to collaborate in research. Yeah. And I think what is the sort of strength of our network is that we are multi-professionals. We have nurses, midwives, doctors, psychologists, and most of all, in recent years, also parents have been involved in our symposiums. And I have served the director for this FCAN network since 2014. Yeah, and then this is actually the picture from 2017 where we had the symposium in Ghent, Belgium. And that's why the picture is important, because that's the symposium where we actually started or initiated this study. And as you can see, our group has grown quite much in recent years. And from that group of people, I think we were then around 100 in Belgium. So these countries have now contributed to these exactly studies, which we are going to tell you today. So Marsha is from Canada, as Nancy is as well. Bente from Norway, Thomas from Poland, Joke from Netherlands, Janne from Denmark. Anita is presenting Croatia, and Rakel is from Iceland, Kendall from Australia, Ylva and Kaisa from Sweden, and Lisa and we are from Finland.
Okay, so as you heard from Fabiana today, we're looking at the association between preterm birth and symptoms of depression in mothers and fathers, and how that relates to family-centered care. So we've known for some time that parents of preterm infants may have postpartum depression symptoms, or they may even have a clinical depression, which would be diagnosed by a clinical interview by a psychologist, for example. Most of this work that's been done in this area over the last several decades finds that there is an association between preterm birth and depression, so that parents of preterm infants are at greater risk compared to parents of full-term infants who don't require a NICU hospitalization. What researchers do, studies of studies, and when they look across the numerous studies that have been conducted on this topic in various countries around the world over time, they find, in fact, that the rates of clinical depression are quite variable between studies, ranging from 7 to 43% of mothers, with an average of about 30% of mothers having a clinical depression. And with fathers, there are fewer studies on fathers, but the rates there range from 6 to 30%, 36%, with an average of about 17% across studies over time. We know from these numerous studies that symptoms tend to decrease over time, tend to be highest at about 1 month after the birth, with 36% of mothers having a clinical depression perhaps at that particular time point. The rate remains somewhat elevated compared to parents of full-time infants up until the end of the first year of life. And we know from numerous studies on parents' mental health in the perinatal period that symptoms of depression or clinical depression can have negative consequences for the parents themselves, for the infant-parent relationship, and as well for the infant's development over time. So I'm sure most of you know that depressive symptoms may arise for a number of different reasons in this context, due to the stress of the preterm birth, the critical care hospitalization, the separation of parents and infant, parents' challenges in operationalizing their parental role in an often very professional-centered medical critical care environment. Family-centered care is an approach to care that aims to include parents as true partners in the care of their infant during the hospitalization. And it's been proposed that this approach to care could actually play a role in reducing this problem of parental depression. But really, there's been very little systematic research that's been done on this particular issue. So what our group undertook was to address this global challenge of parents' depressive symptoms in the NICU context, to see if, in fact, family-centered care could be playing a role here in actually protecting parents from experiencing symptoms of depression. So the aim of the study was to examine whether parents' perceptions of the family-centered care they received during their baby's hospitalization is associated with their depressive symptoms at the time that their baby's about to go home from the hospital, and again after they've gone home from hospital at about 4 months corrected age. So that's the study question that we chose to examine.
And then it's my turn to tell you a little about the methodology, or how the questionnaires that we used in this study. So I already mentioned the 10 countries which participated in this study. In addition to those, we have NICUs from Spain, UK, Belgium, Lithuania, and Estonia. And there were several NICUs participating on a couple of countries such as Canada, Belgium, Sweden, Norway, Spain, and Estonia. And actually 6 of these countries and their NICUs have participated our earlier studies, which have a little bit similar kind of aims. And I would say that what is similar between this unit is that they want to develop their care approach together with the parents. And even like after this study, several of them have asked that, are we going to do a third round of this study? Because it helps them to audit their units and improve their practices against the other units. And about the sample, so shortly only about that it was very practical approach. So we aim to recruit 30 families in each unit, that it was doable in a reasonable amount of time. And then, of course, our main outcome was the depressive symptoms, which were measured with Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, which is a very well-known tool and reliable. It's short, only 10 questions, which means that it's easy for parents to fill in. But what is also important to acknowledge with that questionnaire is that if you score 13 or above, it indicates that you might have possibility for clinical depression. And that was also considered in our study. So if any participating parent scored above that number, so we contacted them and checked that everything was okay and helped them to find seek help if that was needed. And then the family-centered care was measured with 2 questionnaires, and Nancy already defined it to you. But the other tool, which we asked parents to fill in when they were going home, was family-centered care questionnaire. It has 20 questions, and it has formulated that the family-centered care is coming out of respect, collaboration, and support. And then we also had a little bit different kind of approach. We also wanted to know that if we ask parents' perception every day by text messages, so would that give us a different perspective compared to that one that they say it or fill in the questionnaires once when they are going home? And these daily perceptions we asked with text message questions, which were covering the following aspects of family-centered care: active listening, participation in care, individualized guidance, shared decision-making, mutual trust. And by that we mean that parents trust in staff, and other way around, that staff members trust in parents. And also the one question was related to participation in medical rounds and emotional support. So same aspects, quite the same that was in the other tool. So we sent 1 out of these 9 questions every evening to the parents while their baby was in the NICU. And there you can see one example: to what extent did the staff offer you emotional support today? And then the parents could send us a number and also text if they wanted to tell us something more. An important point here was that European Foundation for Parents, FCAN, was supporting our study, and in units where the parents needed support for answering text message questions, so they provided that money for the parents.
Okay, so now we'll tell you about our results. So we had about 1,200 parents from those 15 countries. So this is a pretty sizable sample for a NICU study. A little bit more than half of them were mothers, 646 mothers, who were on average 31 years of age. Most of them were partnered, and about 40% of them had other children at home. There were somewhat fewer fathers, but still a good size, almost 500 fathers. They too were in their early 30s on average, and their babies had been born at around 32 weeks was the median, and had been in the NICU for around 23 days was the median with the range there. and about 27% were the parents of twin infants. So what did we find with respect to mothers and fathers' depressive symptoms? You'll recall that Anna said on that 10-item questionnaire that they filled in that the scores could range from 0 to 30. So what we found with the mothers was that their average score of depressive symptoms was 9.1 at the time of discharge, and that the average score was lower when they answered the questionnaire again at 4 months corrected age. It was 6.6 on average for the mothers. Fathers' scores, average scores, tended to be a little bit lower, which is typical of what we see in most studies. So father's average score was 6.34 at discharge, and it had decreased somewhat at 4 months corrected age to 4.45 on average. When we looked at the percentage of parents in the study who actually scored above that 13 on the questionnaire, indicating that they possibly could have a clinical depression, we found that there were 25% of the mothers who scored in that clinical range, and only 8.3% of fathers at discharge. It dropped, as we see at 4 months, to 12.3% of mothers and 5.8% of fathers at 4 months, having scores on that questionnaire that suggested that they might be experiencing a clinical depression.
And if we then move on how the parents felt about the quality of family-centered care in these 24 units. So if we look about first these questionnaire that they filled in at discharge. So the mothers and fathers scores, they were quite similar. Total score was 3.4 for mothers and 3.3 for the fathers. And now we have to remember that maximum score could be 4. So these are quite okay. And then we can divide the scores like 3 different subcategories, as I mentioned. So parents rated higher scores in respect. So they think that that was best in place. And the lowest scores they provided about the support that the staff was providing them. And the collaboration with the staff was somewhere there in between. And then we were thinking that maybe these daily text message questions could give us a little bit different kind of perspective. But actually these scores or this questionnaire, it was quite the same or same kind of numbers than was the questionnaires. So here mothers and fathers scores were as well similar. So 5.9 for the mothers and 5.8 to the fathers. And now the maximum score was 7. So quite comparable to the other questionnaire. And if we look then the different 9 aspects that I explained to you. So these following aspects were rated above the mean, and we could consider then that these units were doing quite well, but in active listening of the parents, they were also providing individualized information and guidance to parents, and the trust was in place, as was also respect part of in the other questionnaire. So those were the areas where the units were doing well, and the following aspects were rated below the mean. So we can say that these can be some of the things that we could do better. So equal to the other questionnaire, also parents here rated lowest with the emotional support. That's something what they would have needed more. Also, the participation in care was rated low, and this was especially true for the partners or fathers. And also decision making and participation in discussions in medical rounds were rated lower. And it seems that in our earlier studies as well, that there's something related to shared decision making processes and that kind of collaboration that NICU staff could do better. Then we also look at the factors that were related to parents' perception of family-centered care. So in which kind of units parents rated the family-centered care better? And they, if we go other way around, so they scored lower if this unit had any limitations for parents' presence in the unit. And now we mean like every small thing. If they couldn't be there during painful procedures or admission of a new baby in the unit. So if they were asked out of the unit, so or at the room or by the baby, so then they scored lower. Other important thing was for the facilities for the parents. So they need really things that they can stay there in the unit as much as they want. So if the unit has single family room, showers, kitchens or lounge facilities for the parents, so then they tend to give higher scores. And the third important factors was related to social support. If there were like restrictions to visits by significant others, and by that we mean that if the siblings couldn't be in the unit, grandparents or friends, so if any of these were missing, so the parents were rating lower the quality of family-centered care.
Okay, so now to the key question that we were looking at with this study is the relationship or the association between the quality of family-centered care that parents described that they experienced at discharge and its association with their depressive symptoms at the time of discharge, so at the same time, and also at 4 months after discharge or infant corrected age. So what we found was, when parents reported that the quality of family-centered care that they received over the course of their infant's hospitalization was good or great, that was related to having fewer depressive symptoms. And we found that this was true for both mothers and fathers, for both parents. And it was true when we looked at the relationship between the quality, their report of the quality of family-centered care at discharge with their symptoms at the same time, and also the quality of family-centered care they received during the hospitalization with their symptoms 4 months corrected age, so quite a ways out after discharge. So to wrap this up a little bit, we found that symptoms of depression are common in parents of preterm infants, that the provision of family-centered care may be one factor that we could be addressing that could protect the mental health of parents during the hospitalization and beyond. We saw that for the most part, the units that participated in our study were providing a pretty good quality of family-centered care. But as Anna explained, there were some areas where they needed to improve. And that was around the facilities or amenities that they had to make parents comfortable and feel at home and able to take care of themselves during their stay, having access to their significant others and not having any restrictions on the availability of others to be able to enter the unit, and their presence during different kinds of care procedures.
And these are some implications that we have now thinking for the practice. So everything has to start from there, that parents must have unlimited access to their baby. So without that, there cannot be much more. So that's sort of the golden rule. And also that we must partner with parents in all aspects of care or family-centered care. So we should find new ways to provide emotional support, and maybe the social support could be one option, as was said, that parents really need their social network to be also able to be in the NICU. And it's also important that the environment is supportive and collaborative and home-like environment. We would think that in the future, the NICU should look more like home, that it's really a place for parents and the babies, not for staff members. And what we have seen, that the staff requires systematic training on family-centered care. And I know that in North America, you are very strongly working with FCAN, which is a good program, and also implemented in some countries in Europe. And in Finland, we have developed a close collaboration with parents training program, because the shift in staff attitudes, it takes time, and also they have to know more about that and have practical skills how to collaborate with parents. So we support systematic training to the staff members.
Okay, so for those of you who would like to see some more details, our publication is out in the Journal of Advanced Nursing, which is an international nursing journal. And the link is there, and it's open access, meaning that everybody should be able to have access to it just by clicking on that link. And we thank you for attending today, and we're ready for some questions.
Thank you so much. I actually shared the link on comments. So the link is live on comments for the publication. But thank you so much for really shining a bright light on the importance of family-centered care and how can we do better for those families. So I have a few questions here. In terms of the emotional support that you mentioned, that was also analyzed and asked parents. Is this like a formalized group of formalized emotional support, or we talk about maybe nurses just chatting with the parents by the bedside, or having peers or like a peer support in the hospital? So how was that taken by this research?
Yeah, I would say that it's combination of both. And if I start with the clinical view, so I think nurses and doctors or the multi-professional team who is working with the family, so they should be more attentive and actively involved when they meet the parents and listen and discuss. So I think that's one important element. What do you think, Nancy?
Yeah, I think that, healthcare professionals are trained to have some expertise in a number of different areas, but their ability to provide emotional support or know what to say to parents in certain circumstances in a way that helps parents feel supported, talking about feelings, knowing how to respond to feelings. Those are things that they're sometimes a little less well educated with respect to, and something that programs like close collaboration and others can help them with developing that kind of expertise, as well as their medical and care expertise.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I can add it, it's also so that the nurses, for example, they have noticed this themselves, and they would like to have more education themselves.
So, okay, all this work was done prior to the pandemic. You already highlight the importance of having all that in place, emotional support plus social support. And we have been, discussing this for the last almost 3 years now on the restrictions in the NICU and completely losing that piece of the social support. So what do you see? How do you see this moving forward? Because you have all this evidence prior to the pandemic. We understand at the beginning of the pandemic, hospitals did what they had to do, but we have all this much evidence to show the impact, especially on depression, and how that is going to impact the way they parent the baby. So how do you see this moving forward from now on?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, really, we could maybe anticipate that parents may be struggling more than they were prior to the pandemic, which I don't think would surprise anybody for a number of different reasons. That, parents whose babies were hospitalized during the pandemic and had restrictions on their own access, in some cases, on the access of significant others, that might have had, a negative impact on parents' mental health for sure. And we can only hope and promote, that we return to open access and presence of all of those significant people in their babies' lives in the unit once again.
Yeah, I think we could use this research to promote political decision makers or administrators in the hospital, sort of support our claims. And I think the situation, if I now think like Nordic countries, it hasn't gone that bad here, because I think the family-centered care approach was quite well established. So, but those units which were not in very strong going on there. So this has been also an excuse for many staff members to move backwards, and they have noticed that themselves. But of course that happens in Finland as well. I don't mean that, but yeah, we just have to continue working.
Absolutely. We have a question here from Ida. She's joining us from South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Her question is, what is your experience and opinion referring to psychological support for the parents of babies in an NICU? I find they are not part of the multidisciplinary team in family-centered care. That is an excellent question, something we've been debating for many years, why we don't have a psychologist in the NICU.
Yeah, I can answer, at least for the Canadian context. I know that it varies across units, and there are, in fact, units such as the one where I do most of my research. They don't have a psychologist on staff, but there is one where they're able to refer, and social work and psychological supports and staff members. In other units locally, there are psychologists on staff. In fact, they even have an office in the unit. So, with an open door policy whereby parents can just stop in anytime. They know the psychologist's office hours, and it's not by appointment even, although there may be some appointments. But if they, are having a tough day, they know that they can go in and see that person on that day. So, I mean, that to me is, ideal. Not everybody is able to achieve that kind of resource, but I know that, there's associations in the US that are indicating that that should be the gold standard, that there is a psychologist on staff or a resource for support referral anyways, at the very least. Anna?
I fully agree. That would be a dream. So it's not at least a common practice in Finland either. So the psychologist is sometimes rounding or nurse with psychological background or speciality in that. So, and they are talking with parents and who needs help. So they be there, but it's not that systematic as it should be.
Yeah, well, I had a social worker with me throughout my NICU stay, which was so important for me. And I know also they, if the families were in crisis or need extra help, there was also referral to psychiatrist or a psychologist in the hospital. But I do feel here at CPBF that this is like a very big issue to be addressed on how can we support families while the trauma is happening in the NICU. So we do have a lot of work to do, as we all know, and working towards achieving some better outcomes from the mental health point of view for parents. So a question that I have for you, because a few years ago I did go to a conference and there was a psychiatrist talking about the parents already coming to the NICU with depression, clinical depression. Was this captured on this study or not captured? Because I feel also that needs to be taken into consideration when offering support from the get-go when parents enter the NICU.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, Fabiana. You're a researcher critiquing one of the issues or flaws in our study. And that's very important in studies of depression, is to look at previous history of depression when you're looking at somebody's current experience. And we didn't have that because of the way, the context of our study and the way the data were collected. But, ideally it would have been important to have that and be able to control for it. Because you're right, if you have a history of, depressive symptoms or depression before, then you're more likely to have problems and struggle with that after a preterm birth and a NICU hospitalization. So absolutely, those parents are at greater risk.
Yes, and the intervention should start immediately, right? We wouldn't need to wait until parents go home to access more support. So there's another question here. Hi, Judy. Thank you for joining us. There is even less support specifically for fathers. Also, fathers might not express emotions or admit to this as much as mothers.
Yeah.
Well, were there any father-specific supports? Nancy, this is your alleyway because we have a lot of work on fathers in the NICU.
Well, not a lot, less than on the mothers, but you're totally right. What I've seen, and it's been really interesting to watch over the last 5, 7, maybe 10 years now, are father support groups, peer-to-peer support groups. Sometimes led by one of the male neonatologists or other person or nurse on staff. For example, I know of a nurse in a young man in units in the UK who has organized these groups in his unit. And, they have pizza night and, or they play pool or they do something together on the unit or just sit down and talk. And so increasingly, I think these groups are appearing in different units where there are specific peer-to-peer support for fathers. And I think that's just been a wonderful development that's sort of taking off.
Any sights, Anna, from Finland on fathers?
Yeah, and if I comment on this study, so I don't think in any of these units there was nothing like special on place for the fathers. That at least my impression, what we have discussed with the researchers. But yeah, it's evolving also topic here, and also in the SCENE research group, some of our researchers are focusing on fathers more, and now we are like interested in how to sort of measure emotional closeness from the father's perspective as well, and for the mothers. But yeah, I think it's like old-fashioned to think that they are same than the mothers. So but sometimes we still think like that.
Yeah, so there's a hospital here in IWK in Halifax. I don't know if they're running now, but they used to have a fathers group. They would go outside the hospital to watch hockey. There was, as Nancy said, a pizza night for the fathers, and it was run by a father and a male neonatologist. And I think is more relatable, because what we also heard here from fathers is that they don't like the word support because they don't feel they need support. But it's to hang out with other fathers and share, like how the work was that day, or their soccer team. Then they build a better bond among themselves rather than go to have a therapy support group in place. So yes, I think there's a lot of work to be done with that, but we cannot forget them, right? Because once we go home, the process is completely different. And I remember when I left the NICU and I started volunteering and I started sharing my story, and my husband said to me, I didn't experience any of that. It felt like we had a completely different NICU stays and experiences, because I was there during the whole day and he was there after 10 o'clock at night. So the night shift in the NICU, which was completely different than ICU, was a quieter place, not many people around. So our experiences were very different. And I think we have to look at that, how we both experience the same trauma together. One more question I have in terms of longer outcomes on mental health, because you look at 4 months post-discharge, and we see in our own group here at CPBF, because we offer free therapy sessions for families, and a lot of families come to us later, not necessarily in the first few months when seeking help, but they come later on, like near a year old, because there was that year anniversary when everything happened. Are we looking into that longer term as well in the study, or a second piece of that study on the impact a year or two out?
So no, we haven't planned that for this study, because it's also very demanding and requires a lot of resources. And even now we had difficulties to get answers enough for after 4 months of discharge. But we fully agree that it would be extremely important information. And maybe that's also something what is at least here collected in clinical clinic, or what you post-charge clinics, when the babies are coming back to checkups in the hospital. So in some studies here we have used that data, so then we can have a little bit longer follow-ups without burdening the parents.
Any insights, Nancy, that you've seen?
No, I mean, this is always, one of the challenges in this kind of research is getting funding and having resources to follow people that long. It's very resource intense in order to track people down. I know myself, just following families for 9 months in one study at post-hospitalization. They move, they're young families, they're very mobile, and they have a lot going on, other young children. And so there are many challenges to conducting those kind of long-term follow-ups, but totally those are exactly the kind of studies that are needed.
Absolutely. And I have a question or comment to you, because you mentioned the future, the NICUs should look more like home and less medicalized. Let's talk about that, because when I start get involved with the Family Integrated Care Steering Committee. They went to Estonia, they went to Finland, Sweden, where I haven't been in those NICUs, but from what I learned is that there is the home feel. In Estonia, the families move into the hospital to care for their babies. Like there is a stroller parking in the hospital. So let's talk about this, because here in North America, we still have this very paternalistic approach in the hospital where you were a visitor and you're really working hard to take the word out of any policy. But we still have that view. And I know in many other countries, the hospital is the hospital, and we are just there as observing. You are not really integrated. So share your experience with us and how you envision this.
Yeah, I think we are moving forward that. So I think the first thing was that when the single family room and parents close the door, so our approach is different. It's their territory and their privacy. So we have to ask permission to go in. And that has also, of course, been sometimes difficult, like having the normal discussion and chatting. But I think what we are now talking about, that it shouldn't be so sterile, the whole room, that there has to be parent stuff. It has to look like their home, and they can have to have food there and things like that. So I think we are still too clean or like hospital-like. But of course, if parents are there 24/7 or as much as they can, so it starts to like be their home. So we are moving there.
Yeah, one of the nice things about being part of the SCENE group and attending meetings in different countries, Fabiana, is that we do go to see units in different places. And obviously newer units are more homey and more family friendly than older units. And so, the age of the unit and the resources in those particular locations plays a role in what's available. But you can definitely see differences across countries with respect to how home-like or family-friendly, the units are. But there are things that can be done that even within units that are not designed for families to be present, to help them feel present. And, in the beginning, families in some units here had to go to another floor to have a shower because there wasn't a shower in the unit, but, they made it accessible for parents within the building. And so sometimes we need to work within the constraints of what we have space-wise. But there are ways of working around things sometimes to make it more conducive to families' presence.
I agree, because if there is a will, there is a way to make the families feel welcome in that environment. Because I remember a few years ago, I went to Bogota and I visited a public hospital, NICU, and there was not even a chair by the bedside. And I was in shock because I thought, oh my, I had just left an ICU 4 years before when I saw that. It was a completely different experience. I was in an open bay unit. We had a chair by the bedside. We didn't have privacy, but seeing a unit with no chair for the parent, it was shocking to me. It was very hard to see. So it's very different context in different parts of the world, because we are really talking about, more developing countries, more resources. But what happens in other countries, less resources with the families, and how can they feel more welcome in that environment is still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and I think there are good examples also in that way, that, for example, in Nepal, where I have done research, so there is the kangaroo mother care units where the parents are staying or the mother is there 24/7. So it's their room. There are several mothers and it's like a social support at the same time. So that looked something that I was very, like, how would I say, envying. It looked really good to my eyes.
Absolutely. So any final thoughts before we wrap it up today?
I don't know. We're seeing increasing evidence every month, every week about the benefits of family-centered care for the infants themselves, the parents. So, it's really the way to go. And we're seeing increasingly that units are striving to achieve this. So that's very encouraging.
Absolutely.
And I would like that the next step would really be that we negotiate well with the parents and make shared decisions, that we don't exclude them even from there. So I hope that I will see that in the coming years more frequently.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Anna, for joining us from Finland today. It's an evening for you, so I'm very grateful that you took the time to share your expertise with us today. And Nancy, and thank you so much for joining us, for always supporting the work that we do here at CPBF. I'm so grateful, and to be able to work with you and see how passionate you are for families is truly inspiring to us here. So thank you, both of you.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Fabiana.
Thank you.
And to all of you watching us live today, thank you so much for joining us. And the video of today's session and all the videos from our live series are available on our website, which is right here, the CanadianPreemies.org. And I want to thank our sponsor, AstraZeneca, for the ongoing support of our education sessions. And we are a charitable organization, and we believe that through support and education, we can empower families, ensuring they're ready to care for their babies. Please visit our website and consider making a donation. Together, we can create a brighter future for all our families. And I will see you again next Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Stay well.